1471 was a decisive turning point in the Wars of the Roses. At Barnet and Tewkesbury, the Yorkists won crushing victories, eliminating their two greatest threats. The kingmaker Warwick was slain, and the Lancastrian heir, Prince Edward, was killed on the battlefield. Soon after, the deposed King Henry VI, imprisoned in the Tower of London, was eliminated on Edward IV's orders, most likely by his brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. With this, the House of Lancaster was effectively erased from history. The Yorkists now stood without any true rival. Edward IV, only a year removed from the catastrophe of 1470, was once again England's undisputed ruler. His authority was now firmly established, both on the battlefield and in the political arena. No longer forced to govern under Warwick's shadow, Edward had become a monarch in his own right. Royal power under his rule reached a level of centralisation not seen in decades. Across the realm, a sense of relative stability followed years of bloody conflict. Many of the great lords were dead, exiled, or had bent the knee to Edward. Trade revived, especially in London, where confidence in the economy returned. For a brief moment, the triumph of the House of York gave England room to breathe. Yet this peace would not last. The collapse of the Lancastrians brought to the surface tensions within the Yorkist camp itself. The rapid rise of the Woodville family, elevated through Edward's marriage, unsettled the older powers at court. George, Duke of Clarence, nurtured dangerous ambitions, and although Richard of Gloucester remained steadfastly loyal, the seeds of future discord were already being sown. Edward had destroyed his rivals abroad, but within his own dynasty, a new storm was gathering. Edward IV's younger brother, George Plantagenet, Duke of Clarence, had earned a reputation throughout the wars for his shifting loyalties. Ambitious from an early age, Clarence never fully accepted his brother's kingship. Deep down, he believed he too had a rightful claim to the throne. In 1469, he had joined forces with Warwick to rebel against Edward, even playing a role in Warwick's diabolical alliance with France. Yet, before the Battle of Barnet, Clarence defected back to Edward's side, helping secure his brother's victory. Still, this volte-face did not make him a trustworthy ally. By the mid-1470s, Clarence's position at court had grown increasingly problematic. Edward's queen, Elizabeth Woodville, and her numerous kin had risen swiftly to prominence, consolidating influence around the throne. Their sudden ascent infuriated not only Warwick in the past, but now Clarence as well. He came to view the Woodvilles as a direct threat to his own influence. Bound to Edward less by loyalty than by envy, Clarence was becoming a dangerous presence. As a prince of the blood, he possessed undeniable legitimacy, but he also entrenched himself at the heart of factional intrigue. In his eyes, Edward was not a rightful king, but a usurper who had stolen what was his by right. This ambition would ultimately chart Clarence's path to ruin. Edward's external enemies had been vanquished, but within his own family, the gravest danger was beginning to take shape. In 1476, fate dealt Clarence a devastating blow. His wife, Isabel Neville, daughter of the Kingmaker, died unexpectedly. Shaken by grief, Clarence grew more volatile, and his political ambitions turned increasingly destructive. His hatred and mistrust of the Woodvilles, once veiled, erupted into open opposition at court. Clarence became entangled in plots against the royal court. Rumours swirled of sorcery and poisonings, while Clarence openly challenged the king's policies before the council. For Edward IV, his brother's conduct was no longer a mere family quarrel. It posed a direct threat to the stability of the realm. In 1478, Clarence was put on trial for treason. Parliament declared him guilty. Edward hesitated for a long time. After all, this was his own brother. But in the end, for the security of the kingdom, he had no choice but to sanction Clarence's execution. The manner of Clarence's death became one of the most debated episodes in English history. Officially, he was executed, yet contemporary rumour insisted he was drowned in a butt of Malmsey wine. Though impossible to prove, this tale was repeated so often in chronicles that it entered legend, remembered as one of the strangest executions in the nation's history. Thus, Edward IV eliminated one of the gravest threats within his own dynasty. But Clarence's fall revealed just how deep the fractures within the House of York truly ran. Edward's youngest brother, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, stood in stark contrast to Clarence. He never pursued the crown for himself. Instead, he became known as Edward's most loyal supporter and most capable servant. From an early age, Richard distinguished himself by discipline, determination, and reliability. Edward entrusted him with the defence and governance of the northern borderlands. There, Richard was able to establish a formidable base of his own. His seat was at Middleham Castle, from which he forged strong ties with local gentry through marriage alliances and patronage. Around him grew a northern affinity, a network of loyal knights and landholders stretching from Yorkshire to Northumberland. This gave Richard both political influence and military strength. Richard was not only a commander, but also an able administrator. Court records often describe him as stern, but fair. Among the northern population, his reputation was high. He was seen as a just lord who brought order, and this bolstered his authority in the region. For Edward IV, Richard was a pillar of reliability. The king entrusted the stability of the north entirely to his brother's abilities. Through his loyalty and competence, Richard emerged as one of the most important figures in the Yorkist dynasty. With Warwick dead and the House of Lancaster destroyed, the power of central authority in England grew markedly stronger. There was no longer a kingmaker to check the monarch's will. Edward IV could now act on his own decisions without interference. Yet one great issue lingered: the lands and estates of the dispossessed Lancastrians. These properties were redistributed among the Yorkists after Edward's victory. Loyal supporters were rewarded, but excluded families nursed deep resentment. This discontent planted the seeds of future opposition to the throne. A striking feature of Edward's policy was his willingness to elevate not only great magnates, but also lesser gentry. In this way, he sought to curb the dominance of the high nobility and to cultivate a governing class more loyal to the crown. While this balancing act strengthened Edward's hold on power, it also created tension with the traditional aristocracy. One of the figures who rose to prominence in this period was the Duke of Buckingham. Within the royalist bureaucracy, Buckingham and men like him strengthened Edward's authority at court. Decision-making in England was no longer in the hands of powerful individual magnates, but was increasingly directed by the king himself and a circle of chosen advisers. By the mid-1470s, Edward IV faced a major test in foreign policy. In keeping with traditional Yorkist aims, he sought to pressure France and perhaps recover the lands England had lost. In 1475, Edward prepared a great campaign, mustered his army, and crossed into France. Many expected this to mark the beginning of a new phase of the 100 Years' War. Yet the outcome was decided not on the battlefield, but at the negotiating table. Edward signed the Treaty of Picquigny, withdrawing his forces without fighting. Under the terms of the treaty, King Louis I of France agreed to pay Edward and England a substantial annual pension. The settlement was controversial among Edward's contemporaries. Some accused him of shirking war and tarnishing the honour of the realm. But financially, the diplomacy was highly profitable. The royal treasury gained immense revenues while avoiding the risks and expenses of renewed war. Edward IV's French campaign revealed him as a pragmatic king. He had secured victory not with the sword, but with gold. This move strengthened both the stability of his reign and the financial foundations of the crown. Edward IV died on the 9th of April 1483 at the age of just 40. His death was sudden, and it plunged the realm into uncertainty. Contemporary chroniclers struggled to explain the cause. Some pointed to pneumonia or dysentery. Others suggested stroke or ailments connected with Edward's increasing obesity. What was certain was that a king who had appeared strong and vigorous was gone without warning, and England was left on the edge of crisis. The heir to the throne was his 12-year-old son, Edward, who would be known as Edward V. But as a child, he could not exercise true authority. The succession immediately triggered a fierce contest for power within the court and among the nobility. Edward IV's legacy was a double-edged one. His strong rule had brought relative stability to England, but it had also fostered rivalries and mistrust within the dynasty. With a boy king now on the throne, those tensions would soon erupt, driving England into a new political storm.